Hey guys, welcome. Today we are starting our lesson number 2 on VMware vSphere 6.7 course. In this course, we are going to discuss ESXi Hypervisor, differences between classic computing and virtualization. You're going to understand how ESXi Hypervisor manage resources like central processing unit, random access memory, and storage. You're also going to explore what is an ESXi host, what are virtual machines, how host client can access these host servers and manage. Then you're going to explore vCenter server and finally the web client. So let's get started with the session. So in order to get started, first of all, we're going to explore what is ESXi Hypervisor. ESXi Hypervisor is something which is actually installed over a bare metal server. So you already know what is a bare metal server. A bare metal server could be a hardware piece, a hardware server. And above this hardware server, what we can have is, we can have a VMware ESXi software installed. Now you would be wondering what could be an ESXi software. So just to let you all know, ESXi Hypervisor is a software representation of the hardware. So let me just quickly write that here. It's a software presentation of hardware. Okay. This is the important software which can actually allow different virtual machine to utilize CPU resources, random access memory resources, and storage resources. You guys are going to understand how that works as soon as we progress further in the course. Now, once you guys got to know what is an ESXi hypervisor, you need to know a couple of things which is important in a ESXi hypervisor, which includes it is a software abstraction of the hypervisor. It creates an abstraction layer of the hardware. It allows sharing of hardware resources to multiple guest operating systems. Okay. Now you can see that there could be multiple guest operating systems running over your ESXi server or your ESXi hypervisor. So consider these are the virtual machines which are running. What could be a virtual machine? Virtual machine is like a box wherein resources are distributed and applications can run over these virtual machines and can access the practical physical server. Now, there are two types of hypervisors. There is one type 1 hypervisor. There's another hypervisor which is known as a type 2 hypervisor. The biggest difference between type 1 hypervisor and type 2 hypervisor is this type 1 hypervisor can be installed, or you can say is installed over hardware. Okay, you can directly install this software presentation of hardware on the bare metal software. Whereas in type 2, you need to have a guest operating system where you can install it. So to let you all know, if you want to install a type 2 hypervisor, then you need an operating system running on over a hardware. And just to give you an example, I'll let you know the example, but before I give you an example, let me just type that for you. So here you can see that you need to install type 2 hypervisor on an operating system. Okay, so this is one of the biggest difference among both the types of hypervisor. Just to give you an example of what could be a type 1 hypervisor. So with respect to VMware, we have ESXi Hypervisor, which is a type 1 hypervisor, as well as Microsoft also has a product known as Hyper-V, which is installed directly over a physical server, and it is a presentation of the hardware, and over this hardware, multiple virtual machines run over this ESXi Hypervisor or Microsoft Hyper-V. Now, if I have to give you an example for type 2, you would have used a lot of options like VirtualBox, as well as you would have also used a VMware Workstation, which is actually installed on your local machine over your operating system, and it creates multiple virtual machines within your computer, and it utilizes your random access memory, and there are various examples. So these are the three examples. Then again, for Microsoft, we have virtual PC, that is a type 2 hypervisor programs available. So I believe you guys understand what is a type 1 hypervisor and what is a type 2 hypervisor. So type 1 hypervisor are meant for cloud servers where a big data center is available and multiple servers are deployed. So over this multiple servers, you have to install the ESXi hypervisor, and over this ESXi hypervisor, you can run virtual machines. As well as, let's say if you are at a local home, if you have one single PC or a laptop available, if you want to run multiple operating systems on it, like an individual virtual machines, then you can install VMware Workstation, or else you can use VirtualBox, you can use Microsoft Virtual PC, and that is an example of type 2 hypervisor. So I believe you guys are clear with all these 4 points. A ESXi hypervisor is a software abstraction of the hypervisor, which means it is a software presentation of the hardware. It creates an abstraction layer of the hardware. It allows guest operating systems to share the hardware resources. And there are 2 types of hypervisors. One is type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is installed directly over the hardware. Type 2 is installed over a guest operating system. Examples of type 1 is ESXi Hypervisor, which we are going to explore in this course, as well as there is a Microsoft product known as Hyper-V. As well as when it comes to type 2, we have VirtualBox, VMware Workstation, Microsoft Virtual PC, all these are examples of type 2 hypervisors. So guys, let me take you to the next stage. So in the next stage, you guys are going to understand the difference between classic computing and virtualization, and why do we need virtualization. Suppose you have a pizza available, okay? You have this pizza available, and consider you are the only one who is going to eat this pizza. There could be various instances that you may be hungry or you may not be hungry. So suppose you're hungry, you're going to eat this complete pizza. That means you're going to utilize this resource 100%. But sometimes, let's say if you're not hungry, if you're already done with food and a pizza is given to you, it may be possible that you're not going to eat that. And that means you're not going to utilize that resource. But suppose in case if you have the technology of virtualization, then there could be multiple people available. It could be possible another person is hungry, he would utilize the maximum resource, or he can eat this pizza. So in order to perform maximum utilization of the physical servers, we make use of virtualization technology. In virtualization technology, computer resources are dividable. It enables a single piece of hardware to serve multiple guest operating systems. You can have multiple applications running, and now the same hardware can be utilized effectively. With the concepts of virtualization, we have already understood in the previous video that you can utilize up to 80% of the hardware resources if you utilize virtualization. But if you go to regular classic computing, you only will be able to utilize up to 20% of the 20 to 30% of the hardware resource. So just to give you a quick example of what could be an emulation of virtualization. So let's say you have a resource. What you can do is you can divide this resource into multiple persons. And now each person, let's say we are going to have 4 persons. So you'll be having 4 persons, and each and every person is going to utilize some of the resource, and it is going to make an effective utilization up to 80% utilization if you use virtualization. So that's where virtualization is pretty important. So I believe you guys understood this concept. Now, how does ESXi Hypervisor manages these hardware resources, and how it allows multiple guest operating systems to access the hardware simultaneously? Now consider you have 3 types of devices. You have 3 types of resources. One resource is a central processing unit. Another one is a random access memory. And third one is a storage. So there are 3 types of devices, and all these work differently. So let us just quickly explore CPU. How virtualization can utilize CPUs between multiple devices. So let me just quickly take you there. So I'm going to quickly search for time slice CPU. So this is the concept wherein time slicing is done in order to perform in order to perform division of central processing unit between multiple virtual machines. Okay, so now you can see that this technology is known as preemption technology. You can also consider what is time cycle in operating system. You can also explore time slicing Wikipedia concept. So now I'll quickly take you there to these concepts. The first concept is the preemption concept. Okay, and what exactly preemption is, I would like to quickly give you. So in computing, preemption is the act of temporarily interrupting a task being carried out by a computer system without requiring its cooperation and with the intention of resuming the task at a later time. So this is somewhat like scheduling. So if I quickly take you here, there could be multiple operating systems available. Here is an example for the time slice. I'm looking for a very nice photograph which can help you understand this concept. So let me just quickly take you here. Virtualization time slice. Okay, or else I can take you to CPU time slice. Yeah, so again, we got to the same concept. So time slicing or time slicing may refer to time slice or preemption, a technique to implement multitasking in OS. Time slicing has various examples. So I believe we need to quickly observe this user mode and this. So just to let you know, so central processing unit works on time slices. So what happens is, let's say if you have multiple applications running, let me take you here. So let's say if you have two applications, let's say you have VM1 and if you have a virtual machine 2. Okay, consider you have two virtual machines, virtual machine 1 and you have another virtual machine, consider virtual machine 2. Now what will happen? A request will go to CPU 1 for one specific time slice. Let's say for a sinusoidal, if I represent time slice with a sinusoidal, so let's say there is a graph. I have a graph here. Now, for one cycle, we are going to give this time to virtual machine 1. Let me just say that VM1 will be utilizing this time frame. Okay, and once it has done utilization, the next cycle will be given to virtual machine 2 for access to the CPU. So now here, this is going to be for central processing unit 2. So what we can do is, let's say from this time to this time, we are going to have this device, virtual machine 1 is going to have access to the central processing unit. Similarly, when it comes, once this cycle is over, then what we can do, we can give the next time slice of the CPU to virtual machine 2. And this is how virtual machine 2 is going to access the resource of the CPU. So that's how one single central processing unit, which could be a very big CPU processor, is divided among multiple virtual machines. So once you guys are clear with that, I'll take you to RAM. So RAM works a little different with respect to CPU. What random memory has, they have addressable spaces. Okay. So what could be an addressable space? Let me just quickly check back if we can have an image here. So let's say an addressable space, address space. Okay. We can use quickly like that. So consider a RAM address space. Okay. So here you can consider this is a RAM address space. Let's say I would like to take you to a process image. And here we have various process images. Let me check out any nice one for you. Okay, so consider the first one. So let's say there are multiple processes running over here. I'll take you directly to the image. Okay, here we have this image available. Now you can see that this is a random access memory. Okay, and this completely is a random access memory, which is going to be utilized. Now here you have address space 1, address space 2, address space 3. Now how division will be done when it comes to virtualization? So ESXi Hypervisor, what it does, it separates these memory spaces So let's say we have booked one specific address space for VMware 1. Okay, let's consider this is for VM1. Again, then we are going to book another address space for virtual machine 2. So address spaces are divided, and these address spaces are dedicatedly given to every individual virtual machine in a virtualization or a cloud environment. So that's how multiple address spaces are occupied by virtual machines, and these virtual machines use that memory space to perform their operations within their desired or within their dedicated address space only. So that's how RAM resources are divided, and they are given to multiple virtual machines which are running on the server. So that's how, as you guys can see, that there are various examples of how things are being done. That's how the RAM is divided. Now there is a third concept, how storage will be divided among multiple virtual machines. So just to let you all know, when you create a virtual machine creates a file which is represented as a virtual hard disk. This file is stored on main storage. Okay, so now if you have multiple virtual machines, consider, so VM1 will have its own file. Let's say we are going to call it as hard disk underscore vm1.img, or any format for hard disk, whatever is used. There could be another virtual machine. It may have another file known as hard disk underscore vm2.img. So now, whenever there will be multiple virtual machines, there will be two files which will be stored on this hard disk, and virtual machines are going to access the hard disk space within that file only. They are going to store all that information within that img file only. So that's how storage, if there is a big storage, then that big storage is divided into multiple virtual machines. So this is how virtualization works. Now I'll take you to the next concept. Now once you're done with that, you can see that there are ESXi host. And what is an ESXi host? That we would like to quickly check back. So host usually represents a single installation of ESXi on server hardware. Okay, so you can quickly check back. Consider this is your server hardware. Okay, and within this server hardware, what you're going to do, you're going to install an ESXi host here. Okay, so ESXi Hypervisor will be installed here, and this is going to be known as a host. So what are the benefits of a host? Okay, so now you need to understand, hosts are where the hardware is shared. Okay, so host server is something where division of the hardware will be done. All the software processes which are going to utilize the actual physical server will be done at the host server. Okay, and here division of resources will also be done. So you can consider a small portion of the resources will also be divided. And finally, a host can house several virtual machines. So you can see that we have a host block here. So the arrow represents the host which is installed, and over this host you can have multiple virtual machines installed. Okay, so there are multiple virtual machines installed on the server, and by using these multiple virtual machines you can install various different applications, and cloud and virtualization can be done. So once you guys are done with that, now let's quickly see the next concept in queue, and that is, what is a virtual machine? So over your physical hardware, you have a VMware ESXi server. We also call it as a host server. This host server is responsible to divide the resources to host multiple virtual machines. So now you can see that over this ESXi server, we have approximately 6 virtual machines represented over here. Now, what is a virtual machine? So you can consider virtual machine as a box where one operating system runs, and over that operating system, multiple applications run. So now, just to quickly ensure that over this virtual machine, you are going to install a guest operating system. It could be any operating system like Windows, Linux, or any other operating system which you like. And over this operating system, you can install any application which you want. Okay, so that is what a virtual machine is. And just to make you understand the formal definition, a virtual machine is a defined box of resources served to a guest operating system. Resources are taken from the host. So this virtual machine interacts with the ESXi server. So now I would like to quickly make a point here. So this virtual machine is going to speak to this ESXi host, and this ESXi host is going to deliver him the resources. And over this guest operating system, you're going to have your applications. Okay, so this is something which makes you create virtualization and have multiple applications running on one single server. So once you guys got to know what is a virtual machine, let me take you to the next concept in queue, and that is the client. Okay, a client is something using which you will be able to create the server, manage the server, or else you are going to manage all your virtual machines, your hosts, and everything. So earlier we used to have desktop clients, but now the desktop clients are gone. With 5.0 version onwards, there was a new functionality added, and this new functionality was known as a web client. Okay, so after 5.0 version, we have got a web client, and web client is a very important product. This web client is actually used to manage your operating system. It is a one-to-one management platform, and there are so many different things which you will be learning. Just to let you know, earlier, before 5.0 and 5.1, there was a desktop client which was free to use application, but now this is not done. This is not used. Okay, so this was earlier used to manage single host to connect to the vCenter server. So this feature is still available, but this feature is now available in the web client. The functionality has been reduced starting in version 5.1, which means the web client functionality has been introduced, and a lot of development has been done post 5.1 version of the client. Okay. Now, client is OS specific for the PC in use. So that was like that's again, it's not available. So you guys need to know there is no desktop client. We have a web client which you can download on your machine, and this is a vendor based. It's not vendor based. It is just like a web browser enabled. You can quickly add on in your browser. It can be Chrome, it can be Internet Explorer, it can be Firefox, and you can use the web client. Now it is actually used to maintain. This was used for very specific add-on management, not supported by the web client, no longer in development. So these desktop clients are outdated. They are not readily available now, but just for the sake of completeness, so that you guys get to know that do I need to install any desktop client in order to manage my VMware VSphere 6.7 servers or vCenter servers? So no, you don't need a desktop client, and there is only one option available, and this option is a web client. So you're going to download the web client on your local machine, and you're going to use it. And I'll let you know how you're going to download the web client, how you're going to connect to it, how you're going to access multiple various servers that we will be doing it. So let me just quickly take you to the next stage in queue. So the next stage in queue is the server. So whenever we make a network, or whenever we make any multiple device communication or interaction, the first thing which we need to focus is the server. The server who is going to receive the request, and he's going to respond. Now in virtualization, what type of request we will be receiving? We'll receive the request for CPU resource, for RAM resource, or for storage resource. And vCenter server is a service which is implemented to manage multiple VMware hosts from a single point. Okay, so you're going to have a vCenter server, and using this vCenter server, you can communicate to multiple VMware hosts which are running. Okay. So you may have a physical server. Over that physical server, you have a host server, and there is a software known as vCenter server, using which you can communicate to these hosts server, and you can manage all the virtual machines running in. Okay. So now, if you are at a data center, and if you have to manage your services within the data center like applications, virtual machines, and virtual servers, then you will be sitting on a vCenter server. And suppose you are using VMware and there is a client who has installed certain application on a VMware server, then that client will be using the web client and he will only get access to his virtual machine or his applications. But if you are at a data center, you can use this software vCenter server, which is going to help you manage multiple VMware hosts from the single point. Okay. So this you can implement virtually, or else you can implement physically over the server. You can directly communicate to the server box and that can be done. So how is it done? Let me just quickly tell you. So when you have a physical server available, consider this is your physical server, the bare metal server, which you have got in your data center. Now, in order to install vCenter server, initially you're going to have a ESXi host. Now I'm going to write the hierarchy. Okay. So when it comes to the hierarchy, at the fourth stage, consider this place. At the fourth stage, I'm going to have, let's say, let me just type from here. So from the fourth stage, I'm going to have bare metal server. This is your bare metal server. Above bare metal server, we are going to have ESXi Host Hypervisor, okay, which is a software emulation. Over this, you can have a Windows server installed. And above this Windows server, you can install your vCenter server. And then this vCenter server will be able to manage all the virtual machines which are available on your server. Okay. So I believe now the concept is much clearer. So you have a bare metal server. Over that, you have an ESXi Hypervisor, which interacts with the physical hardware. Now, over this, you have to install a Windows server, and over that Windows server, you can have a vCenter server. Now, how it can be used, that's very important to know. So you can use vCenter server. You can use as an internal or external database. It can be you can communicate with single or multiple server, but it requires Windows licensing. That means you need to have a Windows server licensed Windows server installed. For large environments, you can link with other vCenter servers also. So that's what is very important. Let's say if you have a big data center and if you want to move a virtual machine from one vCenter server to another server, then with vCenter server software, you can link to other vCenter server also, and you can transfer the virtual machines. So that you can do. Followed by, you can connect to vCenter server using the web client only. So there is no desktop clients now. We have a web client, which is a browser-based add-on client. So you always need to use a web client in order to communicate to the vCenter servers. And once you guys are done with that, this is not included with ESXi licensing. So if you want to have a vCenter server, you need to separately purchase that. So that's what you need to understand in order to quickly manage that. Once you get a server, once you have installed ESXi hardware, if you want to install vCenter server, you need to separately purchase a Windows server license and a vCenter server license. So that's what is required. Okay, we'll touch the licensing and standard licensing as in the coming lectures, so that you guys will get to know if you are planning to set up a data center, or if you are working professional and you're working with any company who has a big data center wherein the network and everything is managed. So what you need to do, you need to understand all this licensing process or not. Now, so I'll quickly take you to the next step in queue, which is our web client, how you're going to manage this vCenter server. So to manage this, the virtual machines, we do have a web client, which is used to connect to vCenter server and manage multiple hosts at one time. So what do you need? So you need to require a plugin which will be added to the browser. This is vendor and browser neutral, which means you can run it on any vendor. It could be any operating system. It could be any browser. So it's vendor and browser neutral. It's not vendor and browser specific. It is vendor and browser neutral. You can install and use it from anywhere you want. So there is an increase in functionality added after version 5.0. So that these are the questions which may be asked in the examination. will not manage all features. It cannot manage all the features. You have to keep that in mind. And beginning in 5.5, the only way to manage virtual machines with hardware 10.0 plus is the web client. Okay. So these are some of the things which you guys got to know and during this program. Now we are going to undergo a quick test so that you guys will get to know how we can gain most out of this training. So there is a test which we will be conducting, and I believe you guys are going to rock this. Now, which statements are true for the web client? Okay, we have just gone through that. So now you can see that it requires a plugin to the add-on browser. That's true. It is used to manage all features. No, that's not true. You cannot manage all the features with a web client. It is vendor and browser specific. No, not at all. It is vendor and browser neutral. It increases functionality was added to version 5.0 onwards. Absolutely yes. Increasing functionality with respect to web client. Desktop was reduced and web client was introduced with 5.0 onwards. And beginning in 5.5, the only way to manage virtual machines is hardware. With hardware 10.0 is a web client. So these are the three options which you need to mark in. These are the two wrong responses, so we are not going to mark. Let's click on done and let's see. So that's 100% correct. Let's go to the next question in queue. The next question says, what's the difference between the desktop client and the host client? Okay, so one of the most important difference between the desktop client and the host client is desktop could be the web client and the host client. So the interfaces on the two applications are dissimilar. Absolutely not. Okay. The host client is just used for one-to-one management. That's not true. Host client can be used to manage multiple virtual machines. You can connect to different vCenter servers. You can transfer it from one server to another server in the data center. All these things can be done. The desktop client is still in development. So that's the host client is just used for one-to-one management. That's actually true. I'm so sorry. So host client is the option wherein you actually do one-to-one management only. Okay, you cannot do that with a web client. Web client cannot have more than one. For managing multiple services, you need to have a vCenter VSphere server. This host client is known as a web client. So web client is only used for one-to-one management. Okay. The host client is a single point of management for entire VM topology. That's not true. So let's mark it done, and that's correct. So let's go to the next question in queue. The next question says, which statements best describe the features and functionality of VMware vSphere vCenter server? So we have already gone through the vCenter server, and you got to know that vCenter server is installed over a Windows server. You do need to have a license, and it's installed over the ESXi Hypervisor over Windows server. So let's have a look. So it can be used as an internal or external database. That's for sure. It can connect to vCenter server using the desktop or web client. It does not require a separate license. It do need a separate license. Okay. It is a single server. It can link with other vCenter servers. So definitely yes, it can link with other vCenter servers. It is a single server. No, it's not a single server. It does not require a separate license, but vCenter server requires a separate license. Okay. It can connect to vCenter using the desktop or web client. Yeah, that I believe that is true, wherein you can use a web client and you can connect to the vCenter server. So let's go for it, and that's correct. So we'll go for the next option. The next question in queue is, which statements accurately describe the differences between type 1 and type 2 hypervisor? That was the first slide which we discussed. So for type 1 and type 2 hypervisor, type 2 is a hardware emulation. That's not true. ESXi and Hyper-V are type 1 hypervisor. Yes, absolutely. So ESXi is from VMware, Hyper-V is from Microsoft, and these are the hypervisors which are directly installed above your physical server. So these are type 1 hypervisors. VMware Workstation and Microsoft Virtual PC are type 2 hypervisors. So yes, that's true. VMware Workstation is a type 2 hypervisor which is installed above a guest operating system. It could be Windows or Linux, VirtualBox. It could be Windows or Linux. So what could be done? You have got a bare metal server. Over that you have an ESXi hypervisor. Over that you are going to have any operating system, let's say, or you're going to have a vCenter server. Over vCenter server, you're going to have multiple virtual machines, and over every virtual machine, you're going to have a VMware workstation maybe, so that you can have multiple type 2 hypervisors. Or else, if you are on a local environment, if you are at home, if you have a laptop, and if you want to use virtualization within your laptop, you can install VMware workstation, and that is known as a type 2 hypervisor. So type 1 is installed directly to hardware. Yes, that's true. So ESXi servers are directly installed over the hardware. Okay. Type 2 can be used in production implementation services. No, that's not true. You cannot use type 2 for production implementation, because production is something like a data center. And in data center, you cannot have this environment. You can only have a physical server over which you can have an ESXi server, and above that, you're going to have your vCenter servers and all that virtual machine stuff. So in production implementation services, we always use type 1 hypervisors. So type 2 is installed on guest operating systems, and that's 100% true. Yes, type 2 hypervisors are installed on a guest operating system. For example, VMware Workstation, which is installed on your local machine over a Windows operating system, and it gives you access to the virtualization concepts. Now, so we'll quickly go here. We have done the concept, and that's absolutely correct. We'll go to the last question in queue. So this question asks you, which statements accurately describe the host server in a virtualization step? Which statements accurately describe the host server in a virtualization setup? Okay, so ESXi server, above that you have a Windows server, you have a vCenter server, which is known as a host server. Now let's see what a host server can do. So yes, host server can contain resources used for virtualization. 100%, that's true. It contains resources used for virtualization. Then it's where the hardware is shared. Yes, it can house several virtual machines. That's true. It is a software component of the. It is that acts. No. So these are the three options. It contains virtualization. So host server is something which actually communicates to the hardware, and it identifies how virtualization has to be done, how the hardware is going to be divided, and virtual machines will be hosted above this host server. So all these three options are true. Let's go done, and that's correct. So we are done with the test, and we have got the right score. That's 100%. So this was your lesson 2, wherein we explored virtualization components, and I believe you guys got to know a lot of stuff during this training program. In this program, we have explored VMware VSphere. We understood ESXi Hypervisor, what is the difference between classic computing and virtualization, how we manage ESXi resources, what is an ESXi host server, how virtual machines work, what is a host client, what is a vCenter server, and finally the web client. Now, you can quickly download a web client and you can get started. To download a web client, I would like to quickly give you a link. You can directly go to vmware.com, and over this vmware.com, you can download VMware VSphere 6.7. So you can quickly go to this link, vmware.com, and over this link, you can download VMware VSphere web client. So you can quickly get started with a free trial. Go here for a free trial, create an account, log into your account, and you're going to get a 60-day trial account to explore VMware VSphere 6.7. So in the next session, we are going to explore VMware VSphere 6.7. Once you guys are done, registration with the trial, we are going to proceed next. Thank you so much, everyone, for being available. Thank you so much for watching. I really recommend you to like, subscribe, and share the video. Thank you so much for watching.